Returning now to our coverage of the conflict in Israel and Gaza, joining us live is Professor Peter Dean, Director of Foreign Policy and Defence at the United States Studies Centre. Peter, always good to see you. Thanks for your time. As we know, the ADF has deployed additional aircraft and troops to the Middle East in response to that conflict. How much do we know about that in terms of the resources, their capabilities, where they're stationed, what sort of role are they playing over there?
Well, this is part of Operation Beach, and this is really fundamentally designed to increase our presence in order to look at evacuating Australian citizens and other foreign nationals in the region. So this is a non-combat role for the Australian Defence Force. It's 2 additional Hercules transport aircraft on top of a Globemaster C-17 large transport aircraft, and additional support with unknown numbers, but I would suggest both Air Force, Army personnel as well, that would be then designed to go in and provide some security for these aircraft if they are required to be used. So this is a prepositioning by the government designed to affect the need to withdraw Australian citizens and other foreign national personnel out of the region if required, and using RAAF aircraft potentially to do that in the face where the circumstances wouldn't warrant or be too dangerous for commercial airlines to be able to achieve the same effect.
Okay, on another matter, speaking of aircraft, looks like the ADF are going to be having some shiny new Black Hawk helicopters delivered sooner than expected.
Absolutely. This is some really good news coming out of the meeting between Secretary Austin and the Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles yesterday in Washington, D.C. And this follows on the back of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States and the state visit being held with President Biden as well. So we know that the Taipan helicopters, after the crash that we had off Queensland and the death of some ADF personnel there, have now been withdrawn from service. That has left a capability gap in our Defence Force and our Army in particular with that helicopter fleet, and that has raised some concerns leading into the bushfire season. But we do have an announcement coming out of Washington. The Deputy Prime Minister wasn't very clear on the numbers and how quickly, but it was a definite commitment from both sides to accelerate the Black Hawk helicopter aircraft coming to Australia, both in the numbers and the speed in which those aircraft would arrive. We're looking at an expected date of them being fully operational by the end of next year. There's pilot training to be done, route training to be done, and the transfer of these new capabilities. But that's a really positive development, given the fact that we've had to withdraw those Taipan aircraft from service. It does leave us with Chinook medium-lift helicopters to be able to provide support to Australia during the bushfire season and other capabilities. But this is a really positive news story. It'd be really good, though, to get the granular details on the actual numbers and the speed at which this capability can be delivered, given the gap that we currently have as a result of the withdrawal of the Taipan aircraft.
Peter, positive news for us here in Australia, but could this closening of ties with the US and the AUKUS agreement lead to some awkward conversations between our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Chinese President when they meet in Beijing?
Well, I'm sure that the Chinese president will raise the deepening engagement we're having with the United States, and that's off the back, of course, of the AUKUS agreement. So the Prime Minister was in Washington. I had long conversations there, particularly about the reforms that are needed through the Congress in the United States to allow the transfer and the purchase of submarines by Australia, but also the speeding up of AUKUS Pillar 2, the advanced capabilities, and other military sales. This is a process that's really deeply involved in US congressional domestic debates. Now, the positive news about that, while it's been slower than some thought, I actually think it's pretty much on track. But the really positive news is one of the reasons it's been held up in the US Congress is because the Republicans are agitating for additional spending on the US industrial base and also basically more broader shipbuilding for the US Navy. So it's leveraged into that domestic political debate in the United States. We saw the Biden administration put billions of dollars extra on the table to break that logjam. And now those pieces of legislation are in place. Of course, this is going to come up with Xi Jinping in China, but I think the government, both sides of government, whether the former coalition government or the new Albanese government, have had a really consistent line on China, particularly in relation to security. And that really hasn't changed. The rhetoric has changed a bit between the two governments, the kind of way they go about it on the operational sense, but the overall strategic approach and the overall policy approach hasn't changed. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will be really steadfast in his comments when he's in China about the importance of maintaining peace and security in our region. We've seen in the lead up to this visit that Penny Wong came out today, Richard Marles in previous days, with very firm statements around maintaining Australia's sovereign interests and that we're not compromising on anything we're doing for this meeting. And I think it's also instructive that Richard Marles is in Washington, DC, following up with the Prime Minister just at the same time as the PM is about to head off later this week to Beijing.
Yeah, we'd all love to be a fly on the wall for that one, wouldn't we? Professor Peter
Absolutely.
Dean, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.